And welcome and thank you all for joining us for the 2021 U.S. Rowing Annual Convention. I'm Jenny Trays. I'm thrilled to be joining the U.S. Rowing team as the head of community programs starting in January. So throughout the week of convention, it's such an exciting time. We all have the opportunity to learn from our diverse group of speakers and leaders. We encourage you to continue to attend sessions, the coaching conferences, the business of rowing, and of course, the diversity, equity, and inclusion tracks. This session, I'm thrilled to have Lana here with us. The title is Judgment and Choice, Exploring Your Relationship to Change. Lana Hallamarian is here to present. She's a professional coach, an energy leadership index master practitioner, and Gallup certified Clifton Strengths coach. Lana brings over 20 years of for-profit and nonprofit experience, and as I've witnessed, an incredible energy and enthusiasm for this work. So throughout the session, please feel free to use the Q&A function to pose questions to Lana, and of course, use the chat to interact with each other or myself. So Lana, thanks so much for being here. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right, so we're starting just a couple of minutes late, so we're going to do our best to move through this together. First thing is, I'm a facilitator, and so, but my facilitation style, I'm a coach first, and that means that I'm very much in tune to the people that I'm talking to and working with. Therefore, I'm going to ask for everyone to just intentionally use the Q&A function right now, or the chat function if that works, and just say, hey, just let me know you're out there. Just give me a how you doing, a what's up, a something. So everybody, oh, I see somebody in the chat. All right. Okay, I see Zoe, I think, Rebecca, Laura, Rachel. Yes, let's fill up the chat. All right. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Jim. I love this. Okay, yes, keep it coming. Keep it coming. If you haven't said something yet. All right. Hey, Bob, me too. Okay, this is good. I love it. Seattle's in the house. Nice. Springfield, Massachusetts is in the house. Okay, so I'm going to keep talking and get started. You all keep, oh, DC. Hey, I'm from DC, Rachel. And you all just keep letting us know that you're out there. Oh, it's chilly and snowy in Minneapolis. I'm in Denver and we haven't had our first snow yet, which is crazy. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump in. We're supposed to be talking about, oh, is this the screen? Hang on. My computer tries to trick me. So give me one sec. There we go. I think this might be the screen. Let's go for it. You all will tell me, right? Okay, can everyone see my screen? Let's look in the chat. Just give me I see it. If you see it, it should be blue and orange. Okay, thank you. Got a thumbs up there. Okay, we're good. All right, so today we're going to be talking about judgment and choice. Let me clear out the, yeah, okay, so I'm clearing out the Q&A. That way, when you all actually have a question for me, it'll pop up in there. So make sure we use the chat for chatting, give me some, hell yes, or some, I get that, or hums, that type of thing. But if you actually have a question that you want me to answer, make sure you use the Q&A, because that's where I'll be checking for those questions, okay? So let's jump on in. All right, so first thing is, let's just start the conversation about judgment out with just a definition of judgment, okay? So I've got judgment is an automatic and ongoing process in the brain that makes sense of the world around us and intends to keep us safe. That's truly what judgment is. Judgment is constantly happening, and it is our brain's way of making sense of the world around us. So for example, right now, I am, let's say, looking out a window. There's a window right here next to me. I can see an animal. My brain will quickly tell me if that animal is safe to approach or if I should run away. That's a judgment. It's a quick assessment that your brain makes in order to inform you and also to keep you safe. Okay? That's the intention around judgment. So the University of Melbourne did this research project. And in that research project, they were specifically looking at the brain and judgments that the brain makes. What they found is that people make immediate judgments about images they're shown, which could impact their decisions even before their brains have had time to consciously process the information. This is probably not surprising, right? Because there's so much conversation out there right now about this word called bias. Okay, and so that's when we process information really quickly and we make our judgments, but then we also make judgments that sometimes harm other people, but those judgments can also sometimes help other people. Sometimes our judgments can harm us, sometimes they help us. But it's the idea that we all do this. We make these quick judgments about things that we see or hear, right, or experience, and that impacts our decisions even before our brain has had the time to consciously process it. This is all happening automatically in the background. All right, so if you're tracking with me, just put a "I'm tracking" in the chat, or a "yes, I'm with you," something, let me know you're there. Or, okay, thank you, Zoe is nodding along. You can put a "I don't know what you're talking about," whatever. Okay. Okay, hey Jim, how you doing out there? Let's see. Okay, this is all coming together. It looks like we're doing good. Makes sense. Okay, so again, let me know if you're having trouble with anything I'm saying. Please put a question in the chat. Don't let me keep going and you're not there with me, okay? So when it comes to this word judgment, understand that we all have feelings, we all have a relationship to it. So for example, if you were raised in the Christian church like I was, haven't been to church in a minute, don't tell anybody, don't tell my mom, but you might have been taught that judgment is reserved for God or some higher power. In fact, this is true of honestly most religions, right? And that we as individuals are not supposed to judge others, that judgment is a bad thing and that you don't want to engage in it. You don't want to be caught doing it, right? Yeah, Colin says sometimes we don't even wait to see the image before we judge something. Sometimes you might have some thoughts or feelings around judgment depending on your work environment. So for example, I have a lot of lawyers and judges in my family. And so they have different feelings, right? Their ideas around judgment. Also, police officers might have different feelings around judgment. So just notice when you see this word, what feelings come up for you and where might they be coming from? Okay, I'm gonna pause for a moment. Will the slide presentation be available on schedule? I have no idea. That would be a question for one of the US rowing people. So I'm going to keep it moving and see if one of them can do that. But I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to leave it there, Catherine. We'll get you an answer. I just don't know it. All right. Okay, so I'd like for each of you to pause and think for a moment. Try to recall the last judgment that you made without thinking about it. And I know this is a weird thing to ask you to do because you're like, Lana, if I wasn't thinking about it, then how do you want me to remember it? But if you pause and really go back and try to think. So thinking about something like you lifted your foot to climb a step, you reached out your hand to open a door, right? These are all judgments. So try to think back to the last judgment you made, but you weren't thinking about it when you made it, okay? If you found something, type a number 1 in the chat. If you were able to come up with something, type a number 1. You never thought about it, but you did it, and you never thought about it until now, okay? Oh, we're out there. Okay, lots of 1s. Someone did not pick up after their dog, so you made a judgment. And that, yes, I'm not supposed to say this, but that is proper judgment, Rebecca. Okay, lovely. And so this is just an activity to bring this to our awareness, right? The things that we are automatically doing that are ongoing, happening kind of in the background, right? You think about a computer. There are parts of our computer that we see, such as the presentation that you're looking at right now. But there's so much happening in the background of your computer to make that happen that you don't see or ever think about. And it is the same with our brains. For example, can you read this? Go ahead, and when you're done reading it, just type yes into the chat. If you had trouble or could not read it, type no. You're supposed to type yes when you're done reading it. Are you all cheating? There's some quick yeses out there. Must be master readers. You read fast. Okay, Brian. All right. Okay. So what does it actually say? All it's explaining is that if you have the first letter of a word and the last letter of a word in the right place, then it doesn't matter what the order is of the letters in the middle. Your brain can make sense of the word for you. That's all this says. So two things I'm going to tell you. Number one is that Cambridge University actually did not host or sponsor this particular research project, because it's in the paragraph that it's according to research at Cambridge University. That's actually inaccurate. But because this started going around and it was so wrong, Cambridge University actually has since done several research projects around this topic, but they're all like in little pieces of it. So I just want to name that this is not entirely true. That said, we can still learn from it, right? And so what we learn from it is that our brains are sense-making machines, whether they have all the information or whether they don't. And that's the key, okay? So in this case, if you provide the brain with every letter that it needs, it will reorder and resort, subconsciously, and you can continue to read this. A lot of times when you get, this is why you got to be careful who you give your stuff to edit. Because sometimes when you misspell something, people don't catch it because the brain can still read it, right? The brain actually has to be prepped to look for certain changes. So I'm a terrible person. Don't give me stuff to read. My brain does this all the time. A touch of dyslexia helps. Yes, Catherine. I had two people that actually were diagnosed with dyslexia tell me that they wish the world would just look like this. This was so easy for them. So it's really interesting how people who historically are considered, disabled have advantages if you just shift the world just a little hair, right? All of a sudden, now you can have the advantage in the situation, whereas the world was telling you you were disadvantaged in a certain way. Okay, the second thing to know about this is your brain still couldn't read this if you were illiterate. And so how judgment works is it pulls from the vault. The vault would be the brain. Anything that's already in there is used as a resource to your brain to inform you of the world in front of you, right? And so if you don't have the information in there, then the brain has nothing to pull from, and it's less likely to provide you an accurate judgment or a helpful judgment, if you want to use that term. So in other words, if you never learned how to spell in the first place, you couldn't read this because you don't know what's the right order to put the words in. In other words, if you grew up in an area where you were constantly the majority as, I don't know, a woman, let's say your gender is woman, is female, and you grew up in a space like maybe your family was predominantly female and the school that you went to was predominantly female and the town had a female mayor and like it's just predominantly female, women were running shit everywhere you went in your town, right? It makes sense that your brain would have automatic assumptions about the ability of women and also automatic judgments about the abilities of men. Does that make sense, what I just said? Tell me yes or no in the chat. Okay, anybody got a no? Doesn't make sense what I just said. Okay, looks like we're tracking. Somebody let me know if I'm off track. How do you do raising hands? I see your hand is raised, Catherine, but I don't know how to do that. Should I know how to do that? I'm gonna pause and see if I can do this. Oh, maybe you're raising your hand to participate. I got it. So how does your judgment serve you? How does your judgment serve you? You get to think about that. Icon at the bottom, hang on. Oh, okay. So Gretchen, your hand is still up. Do you still have a question? I think you have to type it into the chat. It's not letting me do it. I mean, type it into the question and answer, the Q&A at the bottom, okay? Hit me in the Q&A and I promise I will answer. So So how does your judgment serve you? Let's think about this. And this is, remember, this is an internal process. Don't look to the left or the right, because that person over there has their own experience and their own process that they get to go through. Yours is unique to you. Is your judgment serving you at work, at home, in your life? Right? How is it serving? How is it helping you? So pause and think about that. Those ways where you're actually benefiting the people that are around you or yourself in your work life, in your home life, so life in general. Because judgment is not all bad. It just is. It's always happening. We get to determine whether it's good or bad, whether it helps or hurts, right? Sometimes it helps. And we want to explore that right now. There you go, Jim. It has kept you alive so far. So clearly, your judgments must be working for you. If being alive is the goal, you're winning, right? Helps you take urgent action, helps you understand the world and what's happening, helps us make sense of what we perceive and manage what we try to process. Absolutely. Make sense of the world faster. Schemas, yes, they help us make sense quickly. Keep us safe. So here's another question. How does your judgment serve you when it comes to inclusion and equity? And notice already how you're feeling just by pondering that, by hearing me ask you that. Just pay attention to the feelings, right? You don't have to judge the feelings, just notice them right now. If that makes you uncomfortable to even think about it, is that in service of you? Or could that be holding you back from something, right? When it comes to equity and inclusion, you find yourself often in conversations where there's conflict. Are people often disagreeing, or are people often agreeing? And is there always flow? Because both of those can inform you about whether your judgment is serving you or not, and you get to decide. Yeah, it can create some blind spots. Thank you, Willard. Sometimes my own harmful judgments can be an aha moment. Absolutely, we get to have aha moments about ourselves. Leads us to make assumptions that are not necessarily correct ones, right? Like stereotyping. It can happen a lot, particularly I noticed in the differently abled population, right? Sometimes when we see someone who has a different body than we do, or is using something to aid them, like in blindness, they have the guide stick. If they're in a wheelchair, any type of aids, we tend to make judgments, right? Maybe they need help. Maybe something's wrong with them. Maybe, these are automatic judgments, and they come from somewhere. They come from an honest place. Something has taught you that that was the judgment you wanted to lean into. And you get to choose at any point in your life whether that judgment is serving you still. Maybe it helped you when you were 10. Do you still need it in your 40s, 50s, 30s? You can choose. You don't always have to be who you always were, right? The beautiful thing about judgment can make you miss out on something good. Yes. How do judgments differ from opinions? I mean, they're not super different. Judgments I'm talking about are quick, instant judgments, right? Opinions are typically well thought out, and they're supported by judgments. They're a little more complex. There can be avoidance of the topic. Absolutely. So now let's shift, because I already started talking about it. Uh-oh. What's happening here? Why am I not shifting? Oh, yeah, it's shifted. How does your judgment hinder you at work, at home? Same questions, and thinking about inclusion and equity conversation, right? How do they hinder you? Be honest with yourself. You don't have to type anything in the chat, but do have the conversation with yourself, right? If you're unwilling to notice that any part of you could possibly hinder you, then it's going to impact how you show up in the world, and particularly where you are in these conversations that can really be uncomfortable, like inclusion and equity. Okay, so think for a moment. How's your judgment hinder you at work, at home, personal relationships, right? Professional relationships. When it comes to conversations around inclusion and equity, how's it holding you back? So I'm just going to give you all 30 seconds to really just ponder that around your own judgments. Let me put my clock right here so I don't go over my time. Okay. All right. So let me see the chat. That was about, I don't know, 45 seconds. There can be avoidance of the topic of inclusion among a homogeneous group. Yeah, that can definitely, avoidance is definitely an action or behavior that we can pay attention to in ourselves. When we are avoiding something, it can be healthy to ask, what's that about? Just ask yourself, what's that about? Sometimes it teaches me about my own baggage, such as assigning a reason to someone's frustration just because it's what frustrated me. Absolutely. Thank you for being so honest, you all. The word inclusion sometimes bothers me. Who's got the power to include? Well, I don't know about who's got the power to include, but I do know about who decides whether inclusion is happening. Sometimes this work is not about having all the right answers. Sometimes it's about asking the right questions, right? There are always opportunities to be inclusive. Even if you have a completely homogeneous environment, there are oftentimes people who feel left out, even in those spaces, right? And so deciding what does inclusion look like and who decides whether inclusion is happening, those are the questions that I often will encourage an organization to ask, right? So thanks, Charlotte, for that lens shift. Let's see, a couple more. Let's see, making assumptions that people make judgments in the same way I do. Lovely. John, yeah, we quickly learned that the world doesn't really happen exactly the way we think it does. We all have unique experiences and we see the world just a little differently. So the way that I judge a thing may be different than you. That's a great observation about how it could hinder you. It can create a them and us environment. Absolutely. Whenever you notice that happening, ask yourself, is my judgment hindering me? Okay. So we're going to shift the conversation a little bit. Let's pause to read this quote. I'm going to read it out loud. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so basically what we're about to start exploring is, yes, there are these automatic things that are happening all the time with us, and they intend good things for us most of the time. Our brain doesn't often intentionally give us information that is wrong unless there's something else going on, right? The brain usually thinks it's right if it's going to give us an answer or some information. And yet, we have the opportunity at every moment to challenge our own brains. To challenge our own brain, that's what evolution is, right? This idea of growth. When something happens, there is a space, there's a moment where we get to choose our response. And in that choice and in that space is our opportunity for growth and possibly our freedom. So what is choice? What is choice? Type what you think choice is in the chat, please. Give me some thoughts. What is choice? And if it helps, maybe you can say how it's different from judgment. What are we thinking? I love that, Terry. Thanks for sharing. Choice is freedom. What an interesting perspective. Thank you. Yeah, responding rather than reacting. Pursuing a particular course of action or option over another. Yes, Laura. Let's see, independence. I like that. Choice is not instinctual, it's intentional, okay? It's a conscious decision. Just don't do something, stand there. Take a minute to look at the options, right, Liz? I feel like you've said that to people before. We're just gonna leave that right there. Being intentional, yes. Judgment is more automatic, choice is deliberate. Thank you, Brian. Okay, so you all have got it. What is choice? I'm gonna just offer you this thought. It's the act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities. So here's the thing. The conversation is usually around a couple of things. People often say, I don't have a choice. It's because they don't see the other options. It's not because the other options are not present, usually. And I'm not talking about those like extenuating circumstances, right? It's typically we always are at choice. 99.999% of the time, we are at choice. If we say we didn't have a choice, it's because we didn't like the other options, but there were options. Okay, the only way you can make a choice is if you feel you have options. And so we're going to talk about how do we create a world where choice is happening and we're not just operating automatically off of judgments, because we can do it. And it's going to take more than the, 20, 30 minutes left that we have together, obviously. But at least I want to drop some seeds so that you can start thinking about it. And then you can make choices about what do you want to do? How deep do you want to go? Do you even want to explore this any further? Okay. Oh, thanks, Chris. I hope I remember that. I really want to remember that. Okay. So when it comes to choice, it's all about perspective. So back to the point that I originally said, have you ever heard or have you ever said, I didn't have a choice? Or have you ever felt that you didn't have a choice? You've heard someone say it, you've said it yourself, or you felt it. For how many of you is that true? Okay, Steve said, oh, so many times. Thank you for your honesty. Okay, Liz, sure, okay. Got some yeses, absolutely, from Rebecca, okay. So a few of you out there have had these moments. All right. John Campagna, yep, for sure. Okay, yep, inaction is also a choice, so yep. So think about what I said, that actually you probably did have a choice, you just didn't like the options, or you didn't see any other options. There are people that say, I didn't have a choice, and that's their truth. They did not see any other options for themselves. That could be true. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Take this, for example. Which one is it? 4 or 3? What do you think? Okay. Yep, you all see it, right? And then, so let's say you're in the 3 camp, and let's say I'm in the 4 camp. Are we really gonna sit here and argue about this? Because who's right? Both perspectives are valid, right? Okay, let's do another one. Okay, these people are sitting in the same meeting. One says nothing could go wrong. Another says there may be a small glitch or two. And the last one says, first the oceans will rise and then the sky will fall, right? 3 different perspectives from people all in the same space. Ever had that happen before? Ever been like looking at something and someone sees something totally different and you're like, really? Is that what you see? Yeah. Rachel said all the time. Seriously. Or someone says something, or let's say you're talking to someone and you say a thing, and then that person responds and you're like, what? I didn't even say what? No one ever had that moment except me? Tell me if you've had that moment. Like you don't even know what that person just heard. Yes. Okay. So Steve and Kate, you're in with me. Thank you. Oh, okay. Okay. I think it takes a second for the responses to show up. So I have to be patient. All right. Yes. So I think we've all at least once been in those situations, right? Choices can often be constrained by things like laws, regulations, policies, or cultural norms. Yes, and Bob is what I would say to that. Yes, and choices can be constrained. They are not often eliminated. So as I said earlier, you may not like the choices, but you have choices, right? And that's fine too. You're making, there's a difference between making a conscious choice and making a quick judgment, right? So we may not like all the choices. That's okay. But do see them all is what we're exploring today. Last one. What did you see first? The vase. Interesting. Profiles. Right. And so here's the thing. If I had never told you that there were two things here, you might have just seen the thing you saw and moved on, right? But because you know what I'm doing, you're looking deeper and then you see it. You see the other thing, whatever you saw first, you know to look harder or deeper or differently, then you see the other thing. And to your point, Bob, sometimes it's just that simple, right? It's always simple, it's just not easy. There's a difference. Okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So when it comes to judgment, here's how it shows up for us. We make the judgment and we have our first thoughts, right? Those thoughts produce feelings in us. Those feelings drive our actions and behavior. So why are these conversations important? Because our actions and behaviors are impacting ourselves and other people in the world. And when those actions and behaviors are being harmful to others, that's when we can choose to look at ourselves and choose differently. The work is done in here. If you want to change your actions and behaviors in an authentic way, then the work must be done here in your thoughts and your feelings. Now, there is conversation in the psychology and sociology world about what comes first, your thought or your feeling. I don't care, doesn't matter, right? The point is, one is driving the other, and when you shift one, you shift the other. So whatever you want to, focus on that. But when we focus down here on just changing our actions and behaviors, then it becomes disconnected and no information gets back to the brain, which makes it a temporary solution. You tracking? Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you. Okay. 10-4. I love it. Okay. Oh, Ben, I didn't even know you could do emojis in there like that. You put me on to something new. Great. Oh, let me check this Q&A real quick. So is it really, okay, so I'm answering Laura's question, and the question is it really that linear? Judgments to thoughts to feelings to actions? Yeah. Or it's judgments to feelings to thoughts to actions. And the thing is, it's hard to, it is a quick and automatic process that's happening in less than seconds in our brains, Laura. And so we often don't even think about it. But we can slow down that process and inform it so that it shifts in the moment, right? And it's also, it's linear in the sense that it happens in a certain order, because that's how the brain gets, information out. Like any computer, things happen in certain order, but it's also cyclical. It's happening over and over and over. So hopefully that helps. Let me know, Laura, if that addressed your question. All right, so Kate, I find apologizing and acknowledging past behavior analysis on myself to be the best modicum for improvement. How might I have harmed someone else, and what could I have done better in the moment and do better in the future? Absolutely. And I am going to push you a little bit on that, Kate. Okay, thanks, Laura. Because apologizing and acknowledging past behavior, while it is a necessary and essential part of this process, it is not the end of this process, because the brain needs new information in order to move on. So just because I apologize and address the behavior, I actually didn't tell the brain what to do next. Now it does have new information, but I can expedite efficiently, help to teach my brain what I actually want it to do next time. And that is in this process, Kate, for example, right? So this thing happened, I went and I apologized, but then I sit down like, why did that thing happen? What was my thought? What was the feeling that drove me to show up in that way? Okay, great. So what do I want to think instead for next time? And that's where the work happens. Yeah, our kids are learning that lizard brain thing, huh? So this quote, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. This is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Even right now, everything that I'm saying to you is going through my own filter. My filter contains every single thing that I have seen, heard, said, or experienced today. And every year, I'm in my mid 40s now, so mid 40s years worth of stuff is in there. Also, things that I haven't personally experienced, but have received through messaging out in the world, right? I could have read it on a sign. I could have watched it on the news. I could have seen it on social media. All of that is in my filter. So as I'm speaking to you all, everything I'm saying has gone through my filter. But what we often sometimes forget is that now it's going through your filter as well. And so truth is, we're not actually sure what's coming out on the other side most of the time, right? Until we build up this awareness around the filters. Nothing we see in the world is absolute. Okay, math, maybe, but even science is evolving and changing often, right? Everything we see is our own perception and perspective on reality. It's not an absolute reality. So how do you expand your perspective? Well, you can create circles where there's a void. So for example, if I identify as a Black female and I am, let's see, cisgendered and I'm pretty straight most days. I don't know, depends on what happens. And so if I am surrounded by Black women who are also cisgendered and basically straight, then that's the information I'm getting. If there's a community that I want to learn more about, so for example, and this is true for me, a community I want to learn more about is the Indigenous population. And I want to learn and understand more story, not just what I can Google, but just from hearing from people specifically. That's important to me. So since that was important to me, this past Thanksgiving, I took a trip to two reservations, the Navajo Reservation and the Ute Reservation, and met with people there. We did some learning. I brought my daughter and her friend, and we were very intentional. And then before we left, I said, how can we continue the learning? And they went and looked up areas where we can find people who consider themselves identify as Indigenous, where we can go and find more learning. So my point is that you look at your life, and if I'm saying to myself, oh no, I definitely understand Indigenous people, and I think I can totally explain and represent. I'm totally sensitive to their needs. I consider them. I'm very inclusive. And I look in my circle and I have zero Indigenous perspective in my own personal circle. There's a void. Something's missing, and it's my job to fill that void if that is something that I care about. What I can't do is say I care, I'm inclusive, I'm equitable, I'm all the things because of, I don't know, a workshop I went to, or something that I read on the internet, or a research paper that maybe I wrote. I don't know. You get what I'm saying out there? Just, go create the circle and fill the void. Seek out personal development opportunities like this. So you're already doing this, right? Put yourself in spaces where you will be challenged in your thinking and in your belief system. That is where the growth happens. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Let me check in with the questions. Sorry, y'all. In some forms of therapy, they say practice thought stopping, and to literally say stop when your harmful thought comes up. That's actually very effective strategy. And yes, Zoe. When you mentioned it was cyclical, it clicked. Haha, yay, Kate. Each person's perspective becomes their reality. Facts. Did you initiate these trips? Was it a formal program? No, I just did it on my own, Charlotte. I literally went on a map and looked up the reservations. And then I started looking for things that were, like buildings in the reservations. And I just started calling and like, hey, and I was just really honest. Like, listen, I'm a Black female, and I feel like the only thing I know about Indigenous populations is what I learned in school and what I Google on the internet. And I'd like to not be ignorant. What can I do? How can I come there? How can I learn? Are y'all open to that? And they were really, really open to it. So yeah, nothing formal. Okay. Challenge ourselves is big, hard to do for us adults sometimes. Yeah. And Steve, sometimes just naming it is enough to break the barrier, right? Just saying it out loud. Okay. Oops. Okay, well, I clicked it like once and then it didn't click. So I clicked it 2 more times and now everything's there. So accumulate diverse data, meaning don't just speak from one thing. So I have a lot of people, and particularly I happen to see this a lot with people of color, but I have seen it with everyone, Okay, let me be clear, and trans and queer community as well. Whereas we tell our story from our perspective, and it's like that's what it is. But the thing is, as a Black woman, I am one Black woman. I don't share the exact same experience as every single Black woman in the world. And so get diverse data, right? Go out there, interact with people, ask for stories, and make sure that the information you're collecting is diverse. It comes from different sources. Practice what you learn, try some stuff out. That's how you expand your perspective. You don't just leave here and say, cool, that was a great workshop, check, right? You actually decide, what am I gonna try from this? And you try it, and then you see what happens. Listen more, talk less. I cannot say this enough. Listen more, talk less. It is okay for you to shut up and say nothing. It's literally always okay. Unless you're a paid speaker for an event, then it's bad. You can go into spaces and just listen. And you would be, matter of fact, that would be like a great assignment. If any of y'all are in, just let me know. But here's the challenge, right? That you pick a day, or maybe if you can't do it all day, perhaps you pick like a certain amount of hours in a day. I would shoot for at least 4 hours where you commit to not talking and just listening intentionally. And sometimes it would be okay to just reflect back what you've heard to someone. That's the only talking that you're allowed to do on that day. Okay, Zoe, you're in. Just pick a day. And you all, if Zoe, if you're in, pull out your calendar and put it on your calendar right now. Like, this is my listen more, talk less day. Okay, so it's just me and you, I think, Zoe, because no one else is in. But that's okay. You know, I'm not gonna judge you yet. Something that you can choose to do. It's a really cool experiment. I've done it twice, and I have to say it was really interesting what I learned, not just about other people, but about myself. Okay, so Liz said, I need a minute. Okay, thanks for your honesty. That's been a lot of convention, actually. Yeah, good. Gonna try that tomorrow. Excellent. Okay. So I clicked it, it didn't do anything. So now I'm gonna be patient and see if it will change in a little bit. Haha, look how long it takes, my goodness. Okay, so here's another thing. You do not have to understand it to assign value to it. This is a neat concept, particularly for American culture. I think the way that we have been taught to communicate is that we have to understand what someone's saying in order to value it. We don't. There are so many experiences and perspectives that other people will have that you will never understand. And that's okay. It's okay. You don't have to be in it. You don't have to have experienced it. You don't have to understand it. You just have to appreciate it. You just have to value it. Okay? So this is an interesting concept. It takes a little work around it, but do think about that. How many times have you worked so hard to try to understand someone so that you could appreciate it or assign value to it? Because it's a little bit instinctive the way we're taught to communicate. And we can change that. All right. Oh, okay, thanks, Charlotte. That sounds cool. Live retweeting. Woohoo. So how could expanding your perspective benefit you? Think about it. Same areas, right? At work, at home, in life, and when it comes to inclusion and equity. Just think about that. I'm going to give you 30 minutes of silence. How could expanding your perspective benefit you in these areas? If you want to share it, go ahead and type it in the chat, but no pressure. But do think about it for yourself. And notice if you had a little trouble thinking about this and coming up with something, just notice it, right? Don't beat yourself up about it, but do notice how you're feeling just even about the conversation, right? That could give you some insight into where your blocks are around this conversation. Let's see. Opens your mind, connection, better empathy, better person, greater empathy, understanding. Absolutely. Yeah, if we don't expand our perspective, then we will not see as many choices for ourselves. When we don't feel we're at choice, then we operate on judgments. You all seeing the connection here? Yes, no, maybe so? Seeing the connections? More input from my brain gives more options. Absolutely. Getting more in the vault so your brain can serve you better, right? Okay, good. It's connecting. Okay, so when it comes to judgment versus choice, think about how that's showing up for you when it comes to ageism or ability discrimination, body shaming, culture, right? Culture differences, gender norms, racism, sexism, homophobism. And when you think about all of these things, it doesn't have to be so broad and complex. Like culture doesn't have to be, I don't know, what is it? Chilean culture versus American culture. It doesn't have to be that broad. It could just be being from the South in the United States versus being from the Northeast. This is two different worlds, right? And culture is at play. So think about how you're feeling about these things, how you're doing in these areas, and what of these areas do you want to lean into and challenge within yourself? It's the internal change that produces external results. So the change that you're waiting to see from your leadership team, the change you're waiting to see from the outside world, the change you're waiting to see from, I don't know, USOPC, I'm making stuff up. The change you're waiting to see from everybody out here, it starts right here. Be the change. I know it sounds a little corny, but what you want to see, you must reflect. That's how change happens. So stop looking outside of you. Start looking inside and do what you can do first. So what next? First of all, you get to decide what's next. It's your choice because now you see more options so you can choose. So one thing is you can do something, right? The way that my organization Stand Up, the way we see the world is through these different levels. We start with self-awareness, moves to self-regulation, then intentional action, and then we explore the impact. Is it, what, okay, oh, okay, it's really slow, sorry. Self-awareness is where you do the work and it's ugly and it doesn't feel great. Self-regulation is when you start practicing from the work you've been doing. Intentional actions is that your actions, now you're showing up differently because you've addressed that middle part, thoughts and feelings. And then there's an impact, there's a ripple effect on the world around you and also on you. Now your other option is do nothing. You know, maybe you're like, Lana, this is great and I'm good. That's your choice. I would encourage you to do something, but honestly, that's your choice. We can't make grown adults do things, right? You're not responsible for your first thought. You are responsible for your second thought and your first action. None of us are going to stop judging anytime soon. In fact, we're going to keep judging until the day that we die. It's never going to go away. Some of those judgments are not going to serve us, and that's okay, because we don't have to be our first thought. We get to, like my sister shared earlier, we get to say stop and have a new thought and move forward in that, okay? So what's your biggest takeaway from our conversation so far? And if there are any lingering questions, please type them. Don't type them in the chat, because in the chat, we're gonna do takeaways. Go to the Q&A part of your Zoom and type your questions there, and then I'll answer those. But please do type your biggest takeaway into the chat, and don't leave, because US Rowing still has some things to share with you before you leave and go to your next place. So let's give it about a minute for people to think of some questions and type your biggest takeaway from our time together today in the chat right now. My 4-year-old helps challenge my ideas about gender norms every day. It's actually great. Yeah. Corinne, I talk to parents sometimes, and it's interesting because our children, anyone that's a parent in the room can maybe identify with this. Like, we say we're a certain thing, and then if our child becomes, like, say we believe, okay, well, you know, I believe in the trans and queer community that they should be all the things they want to be. And then when your child comes home and they say, I'm trans or I'm queer, it changes the game. It causes us to really evaluate, what do we think and believe? It's quite different now, you know? So I've heard that a lot from different parents. Our kids are really great challengers for us. All right. And when you type your takeaway into the chat, please do scroll and read what your colleagues are also writing. Someone may write something that speaks to you. Thank you so much for sharing these, you all. I really appreciate your engagement during our time and also your questions and your challenges. It helps me to grow too. Oh, nice, Steve. I like that. Thanks for sharing. I am just scrolling through and reading everything. Maybe let's give like 30 more seconds so you can focus and write your takeaway, and then you can come in and do your thing. Just so people don't have to multitask. I feel like we're all over we're all over the background babies. It's a
I
Zoom
know.
now.
Sorry about that.
But
Lana, I mostly just wanted to get on here and thank you for your time today. These topics are so important, especially as we think about making our boathouses and the rowing community in general more diverse and hopefully interact with people who are different from us. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, and thank you to everyone listening in. You were super engaged. So that was really great to see. I'm going to put this link in here. If you have more questions for Lana that you didn't get to or things come up later, feel free to fill out that form and pose those questions there. And remember to give us feedback on each session and sketch. But thanks so much, Lana, and everybody enjoy the rest of convention. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you all.